to know whether you're speaking as the salesperson, the production person, or whatever, and get that language going between each other. Often the founder, the CEO, is the best salesperson in a small company. But often they're the worst sales manager. The two things, by the way, that I see, most of the companies that I work with are not startups as a consultant. Most of them are bigger, 25 to 50 employees. The two things that I see missing most in companies of that size are sales management and proper financial analysis. So when you bring in a sales manager, if you're the CEO or you're the owner or you're the founder, you may still be the best salesperson, but sometimes you have to take direction from the sales manager. And it's good to know whether you're speaking as your CEO or owner hat, or are you speaking as the salesperson hat? Because the functions still have to be done, even though people are wearing different hats. But the point is that if you scale properly within the confines of your business model, things are going to work. If you scale outside the business model or don't scale properly within it, if you don't scale properly within it, you won't be as profitable as you could. If you try to scale too much in the wrong places, you'll probably be out of business. But if you do scale properly, you're happy and profitable. And this is the whale. He's got a big, he's scaled the entire ocean here in his business model. So he's happy, he's profitable. Just because you're scaling, though, it doesn't mean you're the whale. You can also be a happy lobster. This is my wife and I in front of this crustacean statue. There used to be a place in Woods Hole called the Naked Lobster. And their logo, you can see back over my head, is a lobster in a trench coat going like this. Actually going like this. It was a great place. Not there. It's not called the Naked Lobster anymore. But this is the business I grew up running. Were lobster businesses. Anybody read the book The Millionaire Next Door? It's written about 10 years ago. It was before the dot-com boom. And these guys were a couple of academics, and they were asked to find how you could describe high net worth individuals. What were the demographics? So they started looking in very wealthy neighborhoods, and they found that most of the people in those neighborhoods did not have high net worth. They had high income, but they also had high debt. And it turned out they went around and found out where most of these people, how most of these people lived, and it was a very interesting story. For them, this was, again, was before the dot-com boom. Most of the people in the wealthy areas in that neighborhood were $10 million of wealth, which wasn't too bad back then. And they were running lobster businesses. They were not going to be these huge whales. Their business model wasn't going to be that big, but they were scaled very well within those business models, and they were very wealthy. But the key to either one of these, the happy whale or the happy lobster, is that you know what your business model is so you can exploit it. So scaling to exploit requires knowing this either consciously or subconsciously. Some people luck into this without doing a whole lot of analysis. They just have a gut feel for running that corner restaurant or that construction company or that whatever. But to really take advantage of it takes a little more analysis. You have to understand the details here in what the customer wants, how they want to buy, what they want to buy, and how you're going to sell to them. What are your costs of goods? How are you going to be efficient? And again, what your goals are. If you do this, if you understand what the customer's pain is the same way that they do, and you can solve that pain, then they'll buy from you. If you understand what they're willing to pay, then you can price accordingly and not leave any money on the table. And then you have some decisions. Do you price for, do you price for revenue? Do you price for market share? Do you price for profitability? Well, that depends on your goals and where you are in the stage of growing that company. And does that make sense so far? Any questions about how all those pieces fit together? This is actually a simplified model. There's a great book that I'll give you resources at the end that has a much, about a 7-part piece of the business model and how you can describe it and build it. It goes into a little more detail, but this makes sense so far? But here's what happens if you don't know your business model. You should not scale, because you will scale right off a cliff. And most startups do not know their business model. When you have a business model that's known, you know why people buy, you're selling something that people have already bought, then you can do this. You can scale. But if you haven't, then you shouldn't. How many of you in your startups, most of you, from what I heard, was you were going around, were doing startups. How many of you had invented something or are marketing something or putting together something that you believe has never really existed before? That's most of you.
Is it a trick question?
No, it's not. But what that means is you don't know the business model because your customers don't know what you're making. Hey, somebody's buying us all a drink. If you're inventing something that has never existed before, people have never bought it before. So they don't know how to buy it. And you say, well, it's obvious, you just pay money and you get it. That's more obvious in a consumer situation. But particularly in a business situation where you have to justify your spending, there's a process for how companies buy. Part of knowing the customer desire part of your business model is understanding how they buy. What budget does this get approved on? I had this problem starting my video business. This was back, I think, when Abraham Lincoln was president. Movies came out on videotape, remember that? And so we sold these videotapes and we said, you have this library. We weren't actually the first ones to do it, but we came to the idea independently from the other people. And we soon became the biggest and the first to go nationwide. But customers were looking at us, apartments were going, why would I want movies? Or they would go, you're going to come out and take a movie of my place? It just was a long educational, frustrating process of getting them to say, well, here's why you should do it. And then it was, wow, that sounds great. Now I have to get budget approval. We don't have a budget line for videos. What am I going to do with this? And so we had to figure out what budget they could take it out of or how they worked and all this kind of stuff. If you're selling something people have never seen before, it could be the greatest thing since sliced bread. They're not going to know how to buy it, and you're not going to know how to sell it, and so you should not scale. You should not get a full-blown marketing department. You should not get a full-blown sales VP. You should not put money into all that stuff until you figure that out. What should you do instead? There's a methodology called customer development. Anybody heard of this? Good, a couple of you. You should Google those two words and spend a couple of hours looking at the videos and the blogs and all the stuff that's written about this customer development methodology. It's how you figure out who your customers are, how you sell to them, why they buy, etc. And ideally, it's done in sync with product development, so that you actually end up developing a product while you're developing, finding out what customers want and how they buy it, so that the two go together. And it solves this problem. Yes?
Can we ask questions now, or should we?
If you hold them, it'd probably be better.
Okay.
Customer development solves this problem. It's a great quote. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And I was convinced this was said by Will Rogers until I looked it up on the internet. And the internet said, maybe it was Will Rogers, maybe it was Mark Twain. One site had the same quote in two places with both guys' names. So I figured it's not me that said it. That's all I know. Side note, if anybody is a 5th grade teacher, or 6th grade, when kids are just starting to do their homework on the internet, I would give them this assignment. I would give them a quote, and I'd say, your job is to go on the internet and find 5 people that said it. But it's a great quote, regardless of who actually said it. What gets us into trouble often is assuming that our customers are just like us. And I want one of these things, and so they must want one of these things. And I'd pay $1 million for it. So I'm sure they're going to pay $500,000. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's not. But if you don't know, don't scale your company until you figure that out. And the customer development methodology goes like this. There's 4 steps to it. Write down what you know for sure. What you're sure you know. And these actually will be becoming your hypothesis. Take the attitude, as Steve Blank, who was one of the proponents of this, he says, take the attitude that you're very smart, but you're just guessing. And you have to write it down. The reason you have to write it down is because we all have selective memory about what we used to think before. And now we've proven something different. I'll give you a great example of this. I have invested in a company, and I'm coaching the CEO. And one of the women who was on the investment team with me is now on the board. And the company is building out a new facility. And they had, when we invested, they had a prospect who needed to have the facility up and running by the middle of September. And the guy said, no problem, we're planning to have it in by the 1st of September. There's a 2-week lead time, that's not an issue. And a couple of the investors said, you know, you've never built one of these before. You've got all the parts, but you haven't put them all together, and maybe there's going to be a few delays and whatever. And so he said, no, not an issue. Well, it turned out that the big prospect who was going to have that deadline went away, so the deadline is a moot point. But it looks like the construction might get up and running by the 1st of October. And that's not my point here. What I said this to the board member the other day. I said, just so you know, you're having a board meeting next month, but you'll hear about this, but it's probably not going to happen until the 1st of September. She said, oh yeah, we knew that. And we really didn't know that. We invested anyway, thinking that maybe that would be a problem, maybe it wouldn't, but we really didn't know that. But she's now convinced we knew that. And this is what happens to us, because we're all human beings, when we don't write down what we think. So the first step is you have to write down your hypothesis. The second step is get out of the building. There are no facts in the building. There are only opinions. So you have to actually talk, preferably in physical meet space, face-to-face, with customers, potential customers, people who wouldn't ever be customers, and say, you know, I'm thinking of this. Here's what I think I know. You don't tell them you really know it. Am I right? Does this make any sense? Give me your opinions. Give me your ideas. And you start talking to these people on the phone if you can't meet with them all face to face. And you'll find out how wrong you are. Now, for those of us who are married, that's a common occurrence. So it shouldn't be hard. And you're going to be wrong. The good news is you're going to find out sooner this way and cheaper this way. And there's a great book by Robert Townsend called Up the Organization. He used to run Avis back in Avis's heyday. And he says, business is like baseball. You can strike out 7 out of 10 times and still be batting 300. For those of you who aren't baseball fans, that's a good number. You can strike out 7 out of 10 times. You can be wrong a lot as long as you catch it soon and you're not attached to it. It's okay to be wrong,